Hi, all of you. Good afternoon, almost good evening now. Can you all hear me? Is the streaming fine? Yes, hello, all of you. Vidhi, Alan, Debarga, Mohini. Yeah, hi, all of you. Online students, we have shared that document on the link above on the drive. You can download it from there. Okay, so today's session will be taken by Debadatta Tripathi. Some of you have seen him in the book launch. Others, the newcomers who have not met him, who have not seen him. So me and Deb have been partners at Edukemy. While I run the classes, he runs everything else, including the tech, including whatever pedagogy evolution you are seeing that we are trying to bring in here. And an extremely inspiring career record with the background in software industry. He was working with Accenture till I decided to mess up with his life. Okay. And he is an established author. He has his book on the Amazon also, a very good writer. You will like listening to him. And a person who I love talking to, discussing about rights, empowerment, democracy, justice, judiciary, and an extremely well-read man. So me and Deb go back almost 30 years, studying together, same hostel. So friendships plus all the what's, I know his wrong secrets, so does he. Okay, so don't coax him more because he will not, because I will stay here longer. Yeah, online students. So you must listen to this conversation on Ambedkar. You know, there are 4 or 5 books which I think are defining books, which all of you as aspiring civil servants as youth you should read. Just as the way you read Constitution of India. Okay, this is the basis of India's nation making, our aspirations of a modern society. As I say, there are another couple of books, including some of the books written by Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, books written by Abul Kalam for himself, Ambedkar ji's book, Annihilation of Caste. These are some books which you must read and not simply read. Appreciate, understand, and debate amongst yourself also. What did they want to tell us? How far have we come in those ideals of a nation? So I'll try to bring some of these to you slowly, gradually. And why this was the right time is because I was just doing the social issues for many of you. You understand caste, inequalities, issues of gender, identity, conflicts. It's just the right time when we can take on this off. So I leave it to you now, Dave, the students here. So you can ask your questions, and this too sets the camera so they can sit and you can, okay. And this, and you bring it back to 1, it sets up like that.
Okay, perfect.
Flip to this, plus manually whatever you want here. And you want to switch into this mode, scan the scanner, you just have to do this.
Okay.
Yeah, so you help him here.
You'll be here, right?
ठीक है, इसको minimize करो फिर. PPT, पहले PPT चाहिए तुम्हें?
हाँ, PPT.
First the PPT.
Right.
So have a nice time. I'll catch up with you guys afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Chalo. Thank you, Shabir. Guys, I'm audible? Online? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So before we begin, you guys have this? Online, do you have the PDF? I think it was probably uploaded. Perfect, perfect. All right. So let's get going. Yeah, okay. Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, so we have folks on YouTube too, so that's interesting. Good. So first of all, khana ho gaya? Lunch? Time to sleep? So we have a very controversial book to talk about today, okay? And Shabir said that you all read Indian Constitution, polity, serious subjects, society, economic development, nation building, and you read about policies, you read about schemes, and whether they did well or not, things like that. But there is a lot of thought behind all of this, right? If there is an article in the Constitution, there is a lot of thought and dialogue that has happened before this took form. So this is one of the very foundational books that talks about, it is about caste, right? But it is more than just caste. It talks about various other concepts that are extremely relevant, right? So especially things like liberty, equality, justice, which are fundamental things that your knowledge you need to address a lot of diverse kind of questions. So you all know Ambedkar ji. He wrote our constitution. What else do you know about him? Beyond the fact that he wrote our constitution. Online? What do you know about Ambedkar ji? Okay, one other fact. He is probably the only person outside of Mahatma Gandhi whose statues are there everywhere, right? What else? Sorry? National icon? Yeah, obviously. What was he like? Was a nice person to talk to? Pleasant? Tough? Difficult? Rational? So, this book will not only give you an appreciation of the topic, right? Topic to hai apne jagah, but it will give you a fantastic understanding of what kind of leader Ambedkar was, and extremely rational man, and not fearful of telling what he believed in, right? To that extent, have you read this book? Anyone has read this book, Annihilation of Caste? You have? Pura nahi, thoda. Okay. Anybody online? Okay, good. So he wrote this book in 1936. It's actually not a book. It is, he was invited by Hindu Reformist Society in Lahore for an address, right? So he was supposed to address that, and he had some back and forth. He provided them the whole address to just have a look. Eventually, they decided to cancel that particular summit. So the summit never happened. And a big reason why the summit did not happen is because of what was in this book or in this address, right? He said some very inflammatory things, and you'll find that there is a lot of rationality with which he wrote all of this, but there was a conflict of opinion. Eventually, Ambedkar ji actually sold this as, he printed and published this. It cost, I think, 8 rupees or 5 rupees at that point of time. An amazing book where you learn how founding fathers fought to make the society or the constitution, right? So there's tremendous amount of knowledge here. Let's deep dive. And like always, I would preface that we, oh, sorry, this has to be moved, okay. Like always, I preface everything should be application based, right? You guys are all preparing for an exam. It's good to read for pleasure, but you need to read with some intention in mind, some specific intention. So when you are reading current affairs, for example, you don't consume news like an everyday person, right? I'll flip through the news reels and I'll see the headlines, but you will do something different. You'll go into details, you'll do your mind maps, and you'll figure out what are the forces at work that make this news newsworthy, right? So let's look at some questions. And I'll tell you why this is just goes way beyond just the questions that have been asked in UPSC about caste, right? Now, last 2-3 years, these are some of the main questions that have come in. What are the main features of Vedic society and religion? Do you think some of the features are still prevailing in Indian society? Obviously, a big part of the answer is caste, right? Comes from the Vedic Shastras and all of that. This one is a pretty interesting one. Why is caste identity both fluid and static? Have you seen this question before? This was, I think, 2022. What do you mean by fluid caste? Anybody? Fluid caste. Sorry? All right, almost, yeah. Flexible. Mobilization, yeah. So caste system as it stood in the prehistoric era was pretty rigid in terms, I had to do what my father did before me, right? So Varna, Jati and all these things. But a fluid system is, Brahmin today is not only doing priest work, he can do other things. It is accepted. So caste system has changed quite a bit. But there is some things in caste that are also static, right? In some ways there are static. Some people still think Dalits should be treated in a certain way. Some people feel oppressed. They don't get the same sort of access to education or opportunities. All of you have heard about the reservation system, right? Mandal Commission started it. There is a huge caste-based politics that goes on in India, right? Everywhere. So caste system is very prevalent today. It is still there. So a lot of people say, oh, caste is not there, but they're looking at the urban societies, but they're forgetting a part of India that is, that still relies on the static aspects of caste. So let's look at another question. Impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism. So you can see how caste kind of bleeds into other areas, right? So caste system is there, but it has its tentacles in various other kind of going into communalism. There is a relationship with economic liberalization. Has economic liberalization affected all castes in the same way or different? One of the questions that we often discuss in the UPSC context is this thing called inclusive growth. You must have heard of it. Now, caste is a big component of your answer if you're looking at inclusive growth, right? And let's look at another question. Salience of sect. What is sect versus caste? Jati, Varna. I think do some reading. I will cover a lot of this today, but this session is not about teaching you a concept, right? So we'll banter, I'll take questions, we'll try to read from the book. But more importantly, realize the kind of questions that this will help you answer. This understanding will help you answer. So the book is not big, it is probably 100 pages or less. I think 50, 60 pages. And the topics are such that you don't have to go to chapter 14 before you finish chapter 13, and the sequence, you can read any chapter and 2 pages, some chapters are 1 page, and you will get the sense out of it. It can be read as a text, but bear in mind, it is very dense. Dense in the sense that it takes understanding to process. So I have pulled out certain important things that I highlighted when I read the book, and I put it in bullets. So it doesn't cover everything, the entire essence, but some of it. So, don't worry about the pages now, you can look at it later. Now, Indian society is very multicultural, diverse, so caste has some impact there in terms of being multicultural. And culture and social hierarchies are highly interlinked, right? A society's culture, and which is, art, dance, food, all of this, they also vary based on caste and social structures. So there is a inherent thing there. So when you say Indian culture is diverse, it may mean very different to a Punjabi than to a Bengali, to somebody from Karnataka, and based on which caste they're from. So it is very, very diverse. So caste has a role to play. And there's a really difficult question is, caste system cannot be eradicated in India. It is taking different forms today. Is that wrong or right? So these debates, these opinion related questions is what sets apart a successful UPSC candidate from another. I was recently taking interviews of many kids that are appearing interviews this year, right? So I was taking mock interviews. And a lot of times when asked questions about, okay, what do you think, are we doing the right things to advance quality education in India? The answer would be, yes sir, this policy, yes sir, that policy, and there will be 5 policies, and sir, we are doing well, our indexes are going in the right direction, the graph looks good, good answer. But the next layer of that question is, okay, do you know which policies are successful, which are not, which are moderately successful, why they're not working out, why is something working? That's the next layer of information, right? A lot of students falter in that kind of, sort of explanation, because everywhere you will get a straight answer, which is what Shabir calls the L1 level answer. But when you go to L2, L3, you need to know about things like this policy did not work well because there were socio factors or economic factors, other things that are pulling it back, right? So in corporate language, we call it headwinds and tailwinds, right? There are some things that help a policy to go forward. That is called tailwind. There's a wind at your back, so you're moving faster. And there are some things that are headwinds that, obstruct you in your path. So I asked a different question to another person saying, what is your view of what quality of education should be, and what steps would you take? So good answer, but then I asked the question like, okay, which ones of your ideas will run into difficulties? Do you know? Can you imagine what problems might come in your way? So think about the layers of analysis that you might have to go. So just by knowing, okay, there are 4 castes or 5 castes, it's not enough. Where they are, this is basic information. So this book is all about that next layer. So that's why I said this book is dense. So, but very interesting and extremely well written. He was a lawyer, right? Ambedkar ji was a lawyer. So his reasoning and his intellect comes across so strong that even if you don't believe in what he says, you'll be compelled to agree with him. So now this topic is very controversial. So I would request you one thing. Today will not be judgmental, okay? Today we will try to inquire. Why is he saying something? And does that seem reasonable? And what do you think, right? Do you think something different? A huge critic of this book was none other than Mahatma Gandhi. He wrote several articles in Harijan, in the publication called Harijan, in Gujarati. And actually this text that I read, there is a rebuttal from Ambedkar to Mahatma's points too. So it's very interesting to see the dialogue. okay? And everybody loves the Mahatma. I mean, he has his critics, but look at the figure. But you can see Ambedkar standing firm, steadfast, and presenting his views because he is a man of reason. He's not worried about the stature of this person, and he is putting forward his point of view. So I loved reading it. Hopefully you'll get a little bit of that. So now let's look at caste and interrelated concepts. I just threw some words that are related somehow to caste, right? Liberty, right? Liberty is a cornerstone of democratic society, and caste impacts liberty, right? Inequality, absolutely. Racial purity. Have you heard of eugenics? Eugenics. So some people believe in racial purity, that, I hail from this lineage, and, Hitler was one of those people that extensively believed in the Aryan theory, that Germans were purebred, and he used to look for blue eyes. It's covered in many movies, many books, that when he got people from Poland or Austria or other European nations, they used to do a screening. The Gestapo used to do a screening to see the biological features of people, and if they found them to be matching with Germans, they would be kept differently. The others would be sent to the concentration camp. So there is a huge, it was a huge movement in eugenics, and somewhere in the caste system is this belief that there is racial purity and we should maintain it, right? So there can be huge amounts of questions in all of these areas, right? So think about it. Each of these is a topic for essays or many different, as you'll see in the chapter names of analysis of caste, I would bet like each chapter name is an essay topic in itself, okay? So now let's get to, we are all talking about relevance in today's society, right? There's no use studying something that was in ancient Vedic ages, and we're not doing that. So look at what CJI Chandrachud said recently. I think this came in December 2nd, 2023. Essay topic, right? In a democracy, the majority will have its way, but the minority will have its say. Okay, write 300 words, figure out, right? So this, why did he say this? Then he further classifies and says that a society which does not encourage its citizens to critically think, question, engage in non-conformist discourse will fail to progress, because it will fail to create dissenters. Huge statements. Okay, and I was discussing with Shabbir a few minutes ago that democracy needs dialogue. Okay, dialogue needs dissent, right? And as Ambedkar says, dissent is the beginning of reform. Okay, these three sentences, pay careful attention. Democracy needs dialogue, dialogue needs dissent, and dissent is the starting of a reform, right? Again, essay topic. So when you read this book, the reason I'm giving you this preamble to the book is a book, right? So we'll go through some of it, we'll see what the ideas are, but what is the impact of these ideas? Note these things down, right? So this quote from the book was, to me, one of the most powerful things in it, because it is the fundamental reason why he wrote this book, right? So he says, the assertion by the individual of his own opinions and beliefs, his own independence and interest over the group standards and authority is the beginning of a reform. So basically he's saying our society needs a reform, and I must tell you this, if I don't dissent, if I don't stand here and say that this thing is wrong, then reform is not going to happen, right? So pay careful attention. We are inquiring again, reform. Why is reform necessary, right? Let's begin with that. Why did he write this book? We always start with why, right? That's the rule. Why did he write this book? Because he felt reform was necessary in the society. And what kind of reform can there be? Any ideas? Social reform, okay. Economic reform, political reform, okay. Top three: political, economic, social. Very good. Okay, let's go. Now, ignore the top part for a moment. So you all said political reform, economic reform, and social reform, right? So what is political reform? Anybody? Involvement of people in decision, empowering of people, okay. Sorry? Separate electorates, okay. Egalitarian society. Political reform. Say political reform. What do you mean by political reform? Something must change in the political system of the country to make it what? More efficient, right? Why do you need political reform? Because growth and development of the nation. The reform should lead to growth and development of the nation. Now, look at economic reform. Same thing, growth and development of the nation. So, what is the relationship between these three? Political, what is the relationship between these three? Political reform, economic, and social. You've read the book. Okay. So he gave us the answer. Without social reform, political reform and economic reform are impossible. Because politics cannot be separated from society, right? Politics is there for the growth of the society. And economic reform, when it is extricated from social reform, benefits only few. So GDP increases, but GDP per capita stays the same, right? We're going to be a 5 trillion economy. A lot of people say, beat their chests and go home. But if your per capita is less than Bangladesh, right, there's a cause for concern. Why does that happen? If the average is same, well, per capita average might go up if the overall GDP goes up, the denominator being the same, right? But inequality is different, right? So wealth can go to a few if social reforms are not part of economic reforms. So social reforms, Ambedkar argues, is at the center of a growth and development of a nation, right? So these things lead to growth and development of the nation. How do we measure it? By these KPIs, right? So you have GDP, you have inequality related data, and you have human development index. So if you're asked a question, how will you measure inclusive growth? All these three have to be named, right? GDP alone doesn't describe the entire situation. So you have to take inequality. When you look at inequality, you have to slice and dice it based on religion, based on caste, based on other forms of what we call social fault lines. Okay? Now, interesting concept from here. I've given you, at the end of this, there is another excerpt from a different book, by Ramachandra Guha. You know who Ramachandra Guha is? Eminent historian, narrator, social narrator. He's written a book called India After Gandhi. Anybody read it? Even summary? Absolutely find their summary and read it. I'm telling you summary because that book is this fat. Okay? It will scare you, the size of the book. But definitely read the book because I think Bipan Chandra's book is sometimes referred to in UPSC circles, India After Gandhi, excellent book. Because it talks about after Gandhi went and the last 75 years of independence. Of course, you know, he's a critic of the government. He will say certain things that may not align with the narrative. But, you know, as a student appearing an exam, I don't think you should worry too much about political leanings. What you should worry about is the facts of the matter, the analysis of the matter. And sometimes, you know, I saw this in mock interviews also, a lot of students, sir, government is doing great, sir, you know, these schemes have worked great. I'm like, are you a spokesperson of the government or are you a UPSC aspirant? So I think having neutrality and understanding and analyzing these things will be very important, right? So absolutely read these books with some sort of academic need in mind. So make your mind maps, figure out what they're actually trying to say. I've given you this excerpt from Guha's book. He talks about 4 social fault lines in India. Without looking at the notes, can you guess what they are? What are the 4 social fault lines in India? Okay, caste. Caste is one. Since we're talking about caste, obviously it is one. Next, class, economic class, right? Absolutely, great answer. Caste, class. 2 more remaining. Gender, yes, he doesn't talk about gender, but gender is, then, well, number 5, yeah. Religion, yes. Language, there you go. Caste, class, language, religion is what he talks about, gender being the 5th. These are social fault lines in India. When you compare India with China or you compare India with US, these are questions that often come. Some things, oh, Denmark has highest gross happiness index. Bhutan has high gross happiness. Why can't we be happy like Denmark? Good question. What are the social fault lines and what impact does that have? I think it's this kind of understanding of these 5 things will give you immense fodder for your answers. Your answers will go to the next level. So these 5 fault lines actually influence your social reform, right? So that is what needs to change, and you can talk about, we might have gone further along in some places we might have gone back, I don't know, based on where the politics is of the nation. And eventually it is the political leadership that does a lot of this, right? The execution is done by the bureaucrats, but that's where politics influences the nation. Okay? Now, another piece of information. Now, these 3 are linked, we said, in a very simplistic way, right? The social is needed for political and economic. The relationship is not that simple. That is a level 1 relationship. So what is the level 2, level 3? Well, let's go deeper. Okay? And again, thankfully, you don't have to rely on me or Shabir. Somebody iconic has done some really amazing work in this direction in India. And that guy is APJ Abdul Kalam. Okay? I'll give you another book which is a must read for anyone who is doing civil services. is Beyond 2020 by APJ Abdul Kalam. And believe me, it is not dense like Annihilation of Caste. It is very easy to read. It's 299 rupees. And what he has done is he starts with a framework to understand development and growth of a nation. Saying, okay, you are here, you are thinking something should be done here to get to good numbers here, right? That's what the whole game is. You do something different here, and I'll see this number rising. He's given you the framework to think about it, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But beyond the framework, he actually goes in each and every sector of economic development, manufacturing, education. There's a chapter for each one. Manufacturing, education, healthcare, mining. There are 15 different sectors that he has taken. So scientific brain, he's an engineer at heart. So he's not like Guha, who's a narrator and he has ornate English language to describe a problem, but Kalam goes after it in a very, very systematic engineering way. Great knowledge for you to internalize. So ye just buy it on Kindle or book or whatever you used to. It will give you immense, again, material, okay, to write your answers with. You don't have to memorize things. If you understand why he's saying it, and I'll give you two things today, which is the framework that he talks about. And again, I'm telling you this because this is the application of annihilation of caste as a concept, right? It is less about the book, although the book is very fundamental. You need to understand this. So there are two things here. I'll talk about this one later, so just ignore this. He talks about something called user community pyramid. So I'll explain to you, you can have these PowerPoints, absolutely. But in simple words, I'll give this to you, right? So he says, true development or growth of a nation can happen when the fruits of the natural resources get to the poorest and most underprivileged. Agreed? India has so many natural resources, sunlight around the year. We are a sunny country, solar power, we have water resources, we have mining resources. We have so many things happening. The day it reaches the most underprivileged, that is a sign of growth. So this pyramid is nothing but that. So on the top, you see sea, land, river, mountain, forest, climate change. This is his natural resources layer. So he's using science and intelligence, remember. He's not a humanities guy. So he's looking at it differently. So he says, what do you do with resources? The first thing you do with resources is measure, instrumentation, right? Understand how much, what kind of mines we have, where do we have it, what is the, extent of the mining we can do, what kind of natural resources. So the next layer is information collection for analysis, interpretation of use. So he says, if you cannot measure what you have, or you know what you have, you don't know what you can do with it. Simple, right? Logical brain. So that's the second layer. The next layer is communication. So he says, okay, now you know what you have. How do you communicate it to the people that can do something about it? Who are those people? Industrialists, right? People who create jobs, right? People who own businesses, things like that, organizations. So the next layer he calls technology-based societal business model. He could have just said business model, right? He says technology-based societal business model. So he says use the technology for the society and create models out of that. What will these models do or these businesses do? They power the people. So next thing is solutions. What examples? Safe drinking water, water management, fisheries, pest and fertilizer, disaster warming management, land management, blah, blah, blah. Education, these are solutions. So now when you look at a policy, right, you can trace it. How is the policy using natural resources? What kind of models is the government encouraging? So there are critiques of the PLI model, right? You guys know about the PLI scheme? Production linked incentives. So there are critiques of that, saying that we are not really value adding, we are importing more, we are just doing a small assembly piece which is not really value added. So if the price of an iPhone is 100 rupees, the price of this assembly is like 4 rupees, right? The value is 4%. So how much can you do? So there is criticism. Now you can think that is it utilizing the natural resources of India? Is it? So you have a framework to think about it. And then finally, the people, users, the bottom of the pyramid. So he says every time you look at the growth and development of the country, think about the user community pyramid. The real power of India not only lies in its knowledge capital, and we did well in the service industry. That was primarily based on education, right? So we educated our people so they could get into software, they could get into contact centers, they could do many things, assembly line manufacturing. But unless you put R&D, unless you exploit your natural resources, find ways to figure out, oh, this is what I'm good at. This is what I have aluminum, so what can I do with aluminum? So this gives you what kind of focus there should be on import, export, what kind of things you can do with what you have, right? Okay, this is one great concept. The second one is developmental societal radar, okay? So when you say, oh, there is widespread improvement in India is growing, oh, there is so many buildings coming up in Gurgaon, whatever it is, right? This is anecdotal knowledge that the casual observer provides. You guys need to go 2 layers deep. So when you measure growth and development, you measure it along these axes. So he says, are the citizens getting access to food and nutrition? You can find out the KPIs, very simple, right? I'm sure there is somebody who is producing some metric. Is food reaching people? Access to clean water and sanitation? I'm telling you this because the moment you put a caste dimension on this, you will see a different truth. Then you will know if the caste system is still pervasive or not, or which area we have improved. And then when you write an answer, you quote the societal radar, you will see the richness of your answer really come through. Access to healthcare services, income generation, opportunities. So all our reservation system was focused around education and income generation, right? But look at the citizens and something like caste, it can impact any of these dimensions. Right? Have you thought about it? Saying, so instead of having 2 points in your answer, now you have got 8 points, 8 data points. Access to education, electricity, energy, social conflicts and social justice, right? And access to financial services. So this is his radar. This is anytime I'll see a scheme, I'll put the radar against it. I'll see where you lie. This book is going to really prepare you for UPSC. That's why I'm saying over and over again. This book is, in my opinion, should be kind of the gold standard for growth and development in the country. And I think when you internalize what he's trying to, so then he applies this into every sector. He says, okay, let's apply it to the health sector and see, is this really happening? Okay? So with that, I think let's look at the book, right? So these preamble I kind of gave you because then you kind of get the context of where else you can apply caste and social faults to determine what kind of country we can become, what kind of impact social systems and fault lines can have in the growth and development of the country. Okay? All right. I'll try some new technology, so be with me. Although I'm the CTO of the company. Okay, power source on. Okay. Rid of slideshow. Just give me a second, I'll call. Oh, yeah, there you are. ये on करना है. Okay, guys, while we are setting it up, any questions online? So far, so good? Still there? Give me a yes if you're still there. Awesome. All right. Okay. पूरा कैसे आएगा? चाहिए और छोटा नहीं हो सकता? छोटा नहीं होगा? अच्छा ऐसे कर दो. सीधा हाँ हाँ बढ़िया बढ़िया. This is perfect. Okay. All right. और थोड़ा zoom out कर सकते हो क्या? हाँ. अच्छा. और zoom out हो सकता है? Zoom out मतलब पूरा दिखना चाहिए. पूरा दिखना चाहिए. Yeah, Anubha, your question is, please send the link. Link for what? The book? Just Google it. Yeah, just Google the book, Annihilation of Caste by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. You'll find a print, Kindle. You'll also find the PDF for free in many sites. So that should not be a problem. Okay, so introduction, there's a lot of preface, and he talks about his speech and why it was cancelled and things like that. So first chapter is what you said, why social reform is necessary for political reform. Okay, very, is this really necessary? No. Okay. Yeah, Shabir said 2. Oh, perfect. Why social reform is necessary for political reform. That's the first one. Let's go. He talks about the plight of the untouchable in the chapter 1, right? So untouchables were required to have a black thread. They were required to carry strung from their waist a broom to wash or sweep the roads that they were walking on, so that people didn't feel polluted by their presence. They were required to carry an earthen pot hung around the neck for holding his spit. So Ambedkar himself was a Dalit. You guys know that, right? Although the name Ambedkar is a Brahmin name, because that was given to him by one of his Brahmin teachers. And he saw a lot of this growing up. So naturally, your experience makes you. So that's why lifelong his focus was on equality, liberty, and things that he saw that his community did not get, right? So he gives some examples of how untouchables were treated. I'm fast forwarding this because some of it is in the notes, but I want to give you a taste. We'll go up to chapter 14 or 15, not all the way. So he asks, are you fit for political power even though you do not allow a large class of your countrymen to use public schools, public wells, public streets? So back to what we talked about, right? Political reform cannot happen without social reform. So you have to pay attention to every single citizen of India and cannot protect only interests of certain sect, which is echoed by what CJI Chandrachud said in his thing as well. And he has mentioned alienation of caste. I found that interesting because he used the same term as the name of this book. Every congressman, I think it's here, every congressman who repeats the dogma of Mill is the guy, that one country not fit to rule another country must admit one class not fit to rule another class. You see, if you don't agree, Britain should rule us. Why then one sect has to rule another sect, right? Completely logical. That's what you'll find throughout the book. Extremely logical. Let's look at, and he talks about history. He says, history bears out the proposition that political revolutions have always been preceded by social and religious revolutions. Can you give me some examples where a political revolution was preceded by a social or religious revolution? Online? Yeah. So, lot of examples. Any more? Let's go around a little bit. Specific examples. Oh, this happened. This is a political. Which example of Roman Catholics? Peasants' revolution, Sati Pratha before 1857 revolt, tribal revolution. Okay, these are all good examples. Yeah. So, he gives so many examples here. Like he talked about, in India, he says the same is true for the Muslim empire. Before the Arabs became a political power, they had undergone a thorough religious revolution started by the Prophet. Indian history, political revolution led by Chandragupta was preceded by the social and religious revolution of the Buddha. So these are examples. Social reforms brought about by the saints of Maharashtra, that followed the political revolution led by Shivaji. I think everywhere in the world, wherever there's been a societal or inequality, French Revolution is a classic example. The Russian Revolution is a classic example. Wherever there has been a social conflict, it has led to a political revolution. So the interlinkages, wanted you to feel this because we talked about the interlinkages and they are right there. So next, he talks about why social reform is necessary for economic reform, this next chapter. And when we talk about economic reform, or social reform, one thing comes to mind, socialism, right? You all heard about socialism, socialists. What do socialists believe in? Equal distribution of resources, yeah. So they say economic reform by equalization of property, basically. That everyone should have the same share. But he says, if that is utopian, that is the society we should go after, why do millionaires in India obey penniless sadhus and fakirs? Why do people that spend their last pennies to go to Banaras or Mecca? So he's making the argument that religion is also a big source of power. Just by equalizing property, you cannot have social order. So again, very interesting argument that socialism alone is not sufficient for social order. So he says, in India, priests hold a sway over the common man far greater than any magistrate. And things such as strikes and elections easily take a religious turn, can be easily given a religious twist. So these are examples that he provides, and every statement he makes, you'll find enough, like a lawyer, right? So he gives enough citation, evidences, things that will be useful for you. So he says religion, social status and property are all sources of power and authority which one man has to control the liberty of another. Very, very, again, an essay topic. This one sentence can be an essay topic. Anyway, so let's move forward. So this was the second chapter. The third chapter, look at the title. Caste is not just a division of labor, it's a division of laborers. So he says you're not dividing occupations, you're dividing people. Okay? And again, plenty of examples. He says, what about the capacity of an individual? Right? Must I do what my father did? What about my own aspirations? Things like that. So individual liberty is definitely under question when you talk about caste, right? It talks about individual liberty, aspirations, and capabilities. So look at this example. I'll put it here. Yeah, so you can see the yellow underline. Hopefully it is visible. Industry is never static. It undergoes rapid and abrupt changes. With such changes, an individual must be free to change his occupation. Simple logic, cannot refute it. The next chapter, 5. Caste cannot preserve a non-existent racial purity. So first of all, he's making a statement that racial purity is actually non-existent. It is not scientific. How do we know this? I mean, there is enough research in Genome Project. Have you, any of you, done the genetic analysis? It's pretty easily, you can do for like $1,000. I did mine on 23andMe, and I was 100% South Asian. Okay? My wife, who is from UP, Gorakhpur, she was 0.03% Balkan. So, and I've seen and her father, he's got light eyes. So many people in North India have light eyes. Have you noticed? There could be Balkan, European, Middle Eastern, Greek. We don't know. So he uses the same example. And I will read out 4 lines with which he makes the statement. What racial affinity is there between the Brahmin of the Punjab and the Brahmin of Madras? What racial affinity is there between the untouchable of Bengal and the untouchable of Madras? What racial difference is there between the Brahmin of Punjab and the Chamar of Punjab? So if you do a genetic analysis, you may find that the Punjabis are closer together than the people from Tamil Nadu, for example, right? So he's just making the scientific argument that racial purity is something that people who want to preserve their superiority have played a card on us, right? So that's his argument. So then look at this statement. I'm giving you some statements because, like I said, it's a very dense book. You can go on and on about one whole lecture about one single paragraph, right? the caste system does not demarcate racial division. It's not racial division. It is division within the same race, which is very different. It is not differentiating between people of two different races. I'm Indian, you are German. No. You are taking the people of the same race and you are carving a division between them. So goes on and on. I think let me pick a couple more. So this chapter 6, where he starts his barrage on Hinduism. Okay? He starts that, and systematically with logic, chapter after chapter, he talks about the fact that Hinduism needs to evolve as a religion, and eventually he goes all the way to the Vedas and Shastras, and that's where the difference between Ambedkar and Gandhi originated. So in Gandhi's rebuttal, Gandhi agreed with a lot of things he said. But when it came to questioning the Shastras and questioning the fundamental principles of Varnas and things like that, is where he significantly disagreed. And he's like, no, you cannot go there. This is the line you cannot cross. So that was the fundamental problem between the two. The worst feature of caste system is an antisocial spirit. Again, I'm giving you the highlights. Each one, I think they're all in the book, so you may not want, if at all you want to write down the APJ Kalam, user community pyramid, development societal radar, buy the book. This stuff is the reasoning, right? Why certain things are the way they are. But when you look at what kind of things need to change and how they need to change, then the Kalam pictures become very valuable. Okay? So this is more understanding. Okay. The higher castes have conspired to keep the lower caste down, and he talks about how that has been systematically done. The nature of religions, he talks a lot about this. He talks about, and very critically, he talks about Islam, he talks about Christianity, about missionary system of Christianity, or the practice of the Muslim leaders. And a lot of people take pride in that, okay, Hinduism is a very tolerant religion. What he's saying is, it doesn't mean that you're tolerant if you did not convert others to Hinduism, but you have made life hell for your own people, right? So it's a very different lens of looking at religion. And man was very critical of religion. He himself very assertively said that he will give up Hinduism eventually, and he has explained why he looked at Islam, why he did not want to convert to Islam. He looked at Christianity, why he did not want to convert. And in the end, and he also looked at Sikhism, and he did not want to convert. Eventually, I think a year before he died, he converted to a Buddhism. He was a Buddhist. But he really loved Guru Nanak. He talks about that a lot. He obviously great proponent of Buddha. He talks about those ideologies as well. So caste deprives Hindus of mutual help, trust, and fellow feeling. So again, argument is, he says, there is a way that other religions bond. So if you have a Sikh, he says, an injustice is done to a Sikh, all the Sikhs will rally behind him. If an injustice is done to a Muslim, all the Muslims will rally behind him. But in Hinduism, that is impossible. You have to take these things into with a grain of salt. He lived in the early 20th century, right? A lot has changed since then, but some of the reasons that he lays out, weigh them. Like I said, it's not our job to be judgmental, but it is important to understand that the reasons he's giving, the rationale is giving for liberty, equality, and justice. Three things that are forming the cornerstone of the Indian Constitution. Okay? So he says, in every religion, in every society, the great treading down the little, the strong beating down the weak, the cruel men fearing not, kind men daring not, and wise men caring not. So he says this happens in every society, right? Again, hugely important. Okay, so basically his main argument is that caste is a powerful weapon for preventing social reform. So when you think about social reform, think about social fault lines, caste, class, religion, gender, and figure out, if you want to do a reform, what are the things, I talked about headwinds and tailwinds. What are the things that prevent you from doing a reform in a certain place? If you answer that question, true wisdom will emerge. Right? Somebody will say, okay, why is it is so difficult to do a social reform to do away with inequality? Now you've got some dimensions to look at, right? So then chapter 14 onwards, he starts talking about his ideal. He basically says, so therefore, right? I've given you my thought process. What is my ideal? My ideal for liberty, equality, and fraternity. He uses the word fraternity. Can anybody guess why? We all know what fraternity is, right? Yeah, brotherhood. But why does he use the word fraternity in this context? He says when the fault lines are removed, there can be exchange. Okay? And when there is effective exchange of different things, then societies really grow because they're enriched by each other's knowledge. Right? Again, there's two paragraphs on this particular topic which are very, very valuable. So, great concept. Okay. He took a dig at Arya Samaj. Basically, he had a deep, a very clear view about what he thought about the religious texts, Shastras and Vedas. He has gone into, so he is also, he has his critics, right? So his critics, one of his critics is that Ambedkar cherry-picked things that are arguable or debatable, and he said, he concluded, unflattering inferences from those, right? So he concluded something bad because he looked at the ones that are confusing. Could be, but that's his thought process, right? So then Chaturvarnya is the most vicious system for the Shudras. Caste among Hindus is not the same among castes as in non-Hindus. So he makes the argument that sometimes we say that, okay, Hinduism also has caste, but so do other religions. There are sects within other religions. So he argues, why is that not the same? There is a difference, right? So he talks about rigid social structures. I can do this, but not that. Those kinds of divisions are not there. So that's another. This is very interesting. This I have pulled this out in the notes. He quotes a para from Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. You know Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan? He's a confirmed Nehruvian, right? Very reputed, iconic leader. He talks about the fact that Hinduism has stood the test of time. We've been, attacked on, we have been vandalized so many for centuries and centuries, but the structures, the Hindus' ideals, they have stayed strong and we have survived. So therefore this must be something good, he says, right? There's a paragraph that Ambedkar has put, and then he says, but I must not hesitate to speak out my mind, for I fear that his statement may have become the basis of a vicious argument that the fact of survival, okay, listen to this carefully, the fact of survival is proof of fitness to survive. Anyone does stock market? Past history doesn't guarantee future performance. That's what he's saying. Okay? Something that has survived in the past may not be what you need to thrive in the future. So he makes an argument that you must evolve. And what ways? He talks about that. So you can see that this guy doesn't have an iota of fear in his whole mental makeup, right? Strong, steadfast, rational, articulate, is studied in Columbia, London School of Economics, extremely good with language. So you learn a lot in terms of how to put forward an argument, how to write it, how to embellish it with the right words, the choice of his words. So it's absolutely something to look up to, even if you do not agree. So that's, and then let me run to kind of the end. So he says destroying caste would not destroy the true principles of religion. So he defends that religion and its true principles that make people believe in something spiritual, the divine, the need to do the right things for fellow human beings, spreading love, kindness, all compassion, all of those things will not be destroyed if you destroy caste. So the goodness of religion will remain, but you will remove something that is terribly, discomforting to a large section of the society. Hindu society must be able to evolve. So then he says, struggle is yours. I have now decided to leave the Hindu fold. Okay, that's how he ends it. The text that I picked up has a vindication of caste by Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi's rebuttal is absolutely read this version so you can know where it's like a classic question. The two were like polar opposites in their thought process. So this is important where they actually disagreed. It is right when he started quoting the Shastras and said, this is what is wrong, right? This is where the problems have creeped in. So, and then he has his own rebuttal to Gandhi. So he's written his own rebuttal, detailed accounts, reply to the Mahatma, and then that's pretty much it. The book is, like I said, it's 100-something pages. Each chapter is 2 to 3 pages long, easily read without context of the previous chapter. You can read it in short spurts, but extremely foundational in the thought process. I'll go back to the word cloud I presented. And when you think about caste, don't think about it as a one-dimensional thing that was present from the Vedic times, the 4 different types, and all of that, right? It means so many different things. Merit, for example, right? Meritocracy, a huge question. Like this came up during the Mandal Commission, reservations all tied very clearly. Should there be reservations based on caste? Should there be reservation based on economics? Should there be reservations for continued generations? What is merit? When we say that the meritorious should succeed, does that easily mean that the person who scores marks should be at the top of the line? Or should we consider that the starting points of different students are different, and the hardships that they have to overcome because of their social status, the opportunities that are available to them, the exposures are different, therefore we should have a different solution. When I was in college, Shabir and I were together in college, we went out to do the strike for Mandal Commission. Okay, he said, we have stories. So we all went out, right? We were all general quota guys, right? So we went out. I'm sure half the guys didn't even know which quota system they were, right? Whether they were going to benefit or not. Most of the people are out there just because they didn't want college to continue or the exams to be postponed, sine die, right? But now when I look back and I think, I'm questioning a lot of the methods, but I find myself agreeing to a lot of the intentions behind it. I find myself disagreeing with the vote bank politics, which happens even now. But when you look at Kalam's societal radar and you put a community and you measure it based on caste structures, then that presents a very quantified view of things. So do this exercise. I think you will get the data on internet. Maybe some things will be very accurate to the last year. Even if it's not, like look at last 20, 30 years of data of anything, any of those dimensions, plot them based on communities or castes, and then try to see the picture. It'll become very, very clear to you. If I had that analysis done, I could have shown it to you. We'll try to do it. But that will be an incredibly amazing exercise. You just do it and see where we are as a nation, right? Because that's the radar Kalam has given us. Basically, what's the radar? It's like your dashboard, right? If you're driving a car, that should be front and center of my car dashboard. So what metric should I look at? So if somebody, the classic interview question, growth and development of the country, what KPI should you think you should look at to describe the growth and development of the country, right? You can say, sir, there are many. Of course there are many, but he's not asking you the answer, right answer, like, okay, here are the 4. He's testing your approach. Or she's trying to figure out how well you know this area, how you think about this problem, right? So think about that, and I think that's pretty much all I had, guys. Any questions? I hope this was useful. Any thoughts, observations? You'll have this presentation. We'll get this uploaded on your lesson plan, so you'll get it. But definitely do read this book. I'll suggest you do one more thing. There is a comparative book between Gandhi's view and Ambedkar's view by Dr. Arundhati Roy called The Doctor and the Saint, okay, which is equally controversial like the annihilation of caste, but it presented the differences of opinion. Try to get that summary. And definitely Ram Guha's book, I would suggest. Adam Smith, you guys heard about Adam Smith? The Wealth of Nations. Read a summary of that. I think that will be useful in understanding. Beyond 2020 by Kalam, buy today. If you haven't, it is going to change your preparation. Totally. And, for those of you who are on our Telegram channel or talking to Shabbir, absolutely come back with questions on Beyond 2020, because every chapter of that book is like, you can study one whole economics book, you will not get the answers that are there in that book. So, incredibly fascinating. And then you will realize that how to apply what you are actually learning in class. So the true application of a geographical knowledge or whatever you read here, or polity especially, public ad, you will see that in action. So it's a total application book. That's why I absolutely recommend it. But at the end, all the best, folks. I really appreciate you coming out today. We have a list of books like this that we want to discuss, every other weekend. So absolutely stay tuned and shoot any questions that you have. Happy to take them. Yeah. Yeah. So people think that they are lower, you're saying, or? Yeah, so I think first of all, this book will give you some answers. So he doesn't just talk about specific issues, but he says, see, you have to change your drive change in 2 or 3 different ways, right? So one is change in terms of policy, right? So which is through the legislature, right? You'll do some changes through legislature. You do some changes through judiciary, and you do something from grassroots, working with people. So you have to either give somebody incentives through a scheme to behave in a different way, right? So incentive, reward, and the law. So usually when you think of reform, you think of these 3 different ways. So think about your nudging, right? You are nudging somebody to do something more, right? Different. So either you give him a reward to do it, that if you do this, you will get this, which is all things like subsidies, right? Or you have a rule of law that establishes that, no, you cannot behave like this, you must behave like this. If you behave like this, you are punished. So there are different ways like that. But predominantly it is these 3, legislature, executive, judiciary. These are the 3 ways in which we move things, right? So think about these 3 dimensions and how that can happen. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Online. Okay, thank you. I loved your class. Please come regularly. Absolutely. All right, thank you guys. Signing off. Thank you. है iPad है तो Kindle ले लो Kindle app है ना? हाँ, I have Kindle app. So yes. परचेस में Amazon का डील में करना पड़ेगा. यहाँ पे शो है, यहाँ पे शो है.